Ilham Aliyev was just re-elected president of Azerbaijan with 92.12% of the votes. He's been ruling the country since 2003, following his father and alongside his wife, the vice president.
Devletin müstakilliğini ve arazi bütünlüğünü koruyacağıma.
This election took place in an atmosphere of repression, amid journalists being silenced and the opposition oppressed. Notable irregularities were observed, including instances of people voting multiple times, as identified by the country's last independent media outlets. Yet, this did not prevent international observers from openly praising this election.
So far, the process is good. The most important point, I think, is the participation. The participation in this kind of election, it's really amazing.
Through the Baku Connection project, Forbidden Stories coordinated a consortium of international media outlets to take over the work of journalists imprisoned by the Aliyev regime. We investigated those observers and their motivations.
It's a bit like sending election observers to elections in the former communist East Germany. They had elections. On election day, they were organized well, but the country was a dictatorship.
780 international observers from 89 countries monitored this election. For Azerbaijan, it's a proof of transparency.
Vous savez, inviter les observateurs aux élections, c'est le choix du pays. C'est pas vraiment une obligation.
Among international observers, several delegations came from authoritarian regimes or allied organizations.
Many countries which don't have such kind of high standards for democracy, human rights and rule of law, they are coming only to provide support for current regime. If you invite your own friends to your own elections, it's clear they will say look, very well organized elections, amazing, thanks for inviting.
Azerbaijan strives to legitimize its elections, even though they have been criticized by the OSCE itself, an organization recognized for its methodological standards.
We did see, and what we consider a serious violation, we saw evidence of ballot box stuffing, and we saw that on a high number of occasions. We saw instances of things like group voting, boxes not being sealed properly like they should be, and reports of the number of ballots in the ballot box being higher than the number of people who voted.
The consortium reached out to Azerbaijanis who chose not to serve as observers anymore, deeming it a sham.
There is no point on being observer. You are standing there for 12 hours, see all this injustice, all this like blatant looking at your eye, still lying to you and defending this lie.
This year, some observers were once again obstructed from fulfilling their role.
Polis çağırmaqdan və bizi oradan qovmaqla təhdid elədilər.
This system has been in place for years, and Azerbaijan is willing to pay a high price for it. In 2012, the caviar diplomacy scandal revealed a large-scale corruption strategy of members of the Council of Europe through bribes worth several million euros. Some of them were observers at parliamentary or presidential elections. In recent years, relations between Azerbaijan and Europe have, however, deteriorated.
The most important priority is to keep the power in the hands of the ruling family. So this idea collides with the idea of being the part of the European political space. So that's why for the last 10, 15 years, Azerbaijani government developed a new discourse, which is against Europe.
Tensions escalated further with Azerbaijan's military offensive in Nagorno-Karabakh, as France and parts of Europe positioned themselves in support of the Armenians.
When this war ended, when 100,000 people left their homes, it looks like ethnic cleansing, so Western countries cannot be silent. It is really very difficult to tolerate a dictator like Aliyev now.
For this year's presidential elections, Azerbaijan invited significantly fewer European observers, none from France, and even sent back to Switzerland an OSCE observer.
Actually, at this moment, Azerbaijan is violating its commitment to let election observers in, That's a clear sign that some observers might be objective. But in reality, we don't need any observers anymore. If we look at what's been happening to the opposition, to parties, to journalists, to the media in general, to know that Azerbaijan cannot have fair elections.